Okay, tell me if this sounds familiar. Have you ever wondered why certain people who honestly seem totally normal, maybe even charming, just leave you feeling completely, utterly exhausted? Like you walk away from a 10-minute conversation feeling physically heavy? Or maybe you suddenly find yourself blamed for things you literally never did, somehow playing the savior in a drama that isn't even yours. Look, your struggles in these relationships might be invisible to the outside world, but they are incredibly real. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are unpacking something absolutely fascinating and, to be honest, a real game changer for daily life. We're going to look at the hidden interpersonal dangers lurking in our relationships, but we're doing it through the brilliant psychological frameworks of Carl Gustav Jung. By the time we finish up here, you'll be equipped to spot these hidden dynamics, protect your own mental energy, and, maybe even understand yourself a little bit better too. All right, let's dive right into our roadmap for securing those psychic boundaries. We'll be covering the invisible psychological threat, the masked manipulators, the ticking time bombs, the emotional drainers, and finally, breaking the invisible threads. Let's kick things off with part one, the invisible psychological threat and the danger of the unconscious. So, Jung made it crystal clear that the biggest threats we face day to day, they aren't these conscious, mustache-twirling villains. Not at all. They are unintegrated, unconscious minds basically looking for a host. And that brings us to projection, which is a foundational concept from Jung's work, the ego and the unconscious. Projection is an unconscious mechanism where someone essentially projects onto you the exact things they refuse to see in themselves. From that moment on, you aren't a real, multidimensional person to them anymore. You become a symbolic mirror, an imaginary enemy, or maybe an idealized hero. Either way, you get sucked into a psychological field that just isn't yours. Just let this sink in for a second. What we do not confront in ourselves, we will encounter as fate. It is such a powerful warning. If we ignore these internal forces, they will absolutely manipulate our reality and our relationships. They infiltrate slowly. A veiled accusation here, a loaded silence there, until suddenly you're the one doubting your own reality. Moving on to part two, the masked manipulators, the illusion of perfection and victimhood. So these are the individuals who operate behind massive, invisible, emotional facades, and it's crucial to understand their shared traits. They constantly distort reality. They trap others in symbolic roles, like they force you into being their savior, or they paint you as the ultimate traitor. And underneath it all, they severely lack true psychic authenticity. The crazy part is they unknowingly suck you into their illusions. They feed off your empathy, kind of like a background app secretly draining your phone battery, all just to keep their distorted reality alive. Now, within this group, we usually see two distinct types. First up is the unconscious manipulator. These folks project their repressed trauma, they play the victim constantly, and they literally weaponize your own empathy against you, making you feel entirely responsible for their pain. On the flip side, we have the bearer of the persona. They project this artificial, totally flawless social mask. They're absolute masters of functional superficiality, perfectly willing to suffocate any real authenticity just to maintain a societal script. When you're around them, you just feel this really distinct lack of truth or depth. Notice Jung's specific definition of the persona here. It's the artificial social mask we use to adapt to the world. And hey, we all have one. That's totally normal. But the danger hits when someone over-identifies with it. When they genuinely believe they are only that mask, it completely destroys their authentic self. It derails what Jung called individuation, which is the journey of true self-knowledge. And the worst part? If you live or work closely with someone like this, you'll slowly start wearing a mask yourself, just to survive. All right, part three, the ticking time bombs, the explosions of repression. This category is all about people who rigidly, obsessively control their impulses right up until the pressure causes a massive, unpredictable explosion. To get this, we have to talk about the shadow, a concept detailed in Jung's book Aion. The shadow is basically everything a person refuses to recognize in themselves, shoved deep, deep down into the unconscious. And listen, it's not just evil stuff. Sure, it includes denied dark impulses like envy or hatred, but it also includes repressed positive potential like unexpressed creativity. But when it's ignored, all of it ferments and eventually turns toxic. Think about how this actually plays out in the real world. Look at the incredibly dangerous gap between what they think they are doing and the toxic reality of what they're actually doing. The owner of the repressed shadow genuinely believes they are righteous, balanced, and super disciplined, but their unconscious reality? It's bitter, resentful, and highly explosive. Then you have the moral controller. Consciously, they think they're educating you, acting as your noble moral guide. But unconsciously, they are just controlling you, projecting all their own internal guilt onto your totally natural behaviors. And what does this create? A profoundly stifling environment where the morality of the other person literally becomes your prison. The moral controller doesn't need to use a physical weapon. They use dogmas, crosses, and overwhelming guilt to build a cage around you. You start to feel watched and judged for simply being human. Before you know it, you are repressing your own natural, spontaneous behaviors just to fit an ideal that isn't even yours, all to appease a shadow they won't even acknowledge. Which brings us to part 4, the emotional drainers, symbiosis and volatility. Okay, so these are the profiles that don't just judge you or randomly explode. They actively and relentlessly colonize your emotional energy. Here, we run into Jung's concept of complexes from his work Psychological Types. Complexes are autonomous nuclei of emotion and memory that can abruptly, and I mean without warning, take total control of someone's consciousness. Think of them like fragmented personalities born from unhealed trauma. You might make a totally innocent comment, but it triggers an old wound, their complex hijacks the present moment, and boom, you are paying the price. This dynamic gives us our last 2 profiles. First, we have the complexed. Because their triggers are so unpredictable, they force you into this exhausting state of constant emotional alert. You are forever walking on eggshells. And then we have the psychic vampire. They don't explode. Instead, they dissolve your sense of self through chronic victimhood and this really intense pathological dependency. It's subtle, but it is an absolute draining of your psychic energy. Honestly, with a psychic vampire, the existential exhaustion gets so profound that you literally no longer know where they end and where you begin. They use your empathy like a life support system so they can entirely avoid doing their own inner work. They don't want to grow, right? They just want to be carried. And if you even try to set a healthy boundary, they will masterfully reverse the roles, making you feel incredibly selfish for just wanting to take a breath of fresh air. Finally, let's look at part 5, breaking the invisible threads, reclaiming your psychic sovereignty. So how on earth do we get out of this mess? Well, the good news is Carl Jung didn't just diagnose the problem. He gave us actionable solutions to escape this unconscious jungle. Here is your blueprint. Step 1, develop awareness. Simply naming the dynamic is the absolute first step to breaking it. Step 2, cut the invisible emotional threads connecting you to their narrative. You are not their savior, and you are sure as heck not their punching bag. Step 3, constantly, relentlessly, question if what you are feeling is truly yours, or if it's just been induced by their projection. You absolutely must reclaim sovereignty over your own psyche. Getting out of that hostage position is vital. And look, this isn't just about pointing fingers and blaming everybody else. It's about actively building impenetrable internal boundaries. It's about making a firm decision that you refuse to be a vessel for someone else's unhealed wounds. But to truly wrap this explainer up, we kind of have to flip the script. Because Jung taught that literally none of us are immune to this. Every single one of us has a shadow. So I want to leave you with a bit of a provocative question. Which profile is actually within you? Have you ever been the unconscious manipulator, the bearer of the persona, maybe even the psychic vampire? True psychic freedom and sovereignty always start with self-awareness. When you finally acknowledge your own shadow, you take away its power to control you.